I mean, let's be honest. There's not a lot of good candidates. The Niners going to the Super Bowl hurts them when they don't have a defensive coordinator because Black Monday, is that what it's called? The Monday after the season's over?
Yeah.
That already came and went. And coaches that got fired and then rehired and the coaching trees or the changing of coaches, that's already kind of gone on. And the Niners kind of missed that. Dan Quinn's now the coach somewhere else. He's no longer
Vic Fangio is now in Philly.
Yeah, it's like the coaching candidates. There's not a lot of great scheme fits, honestly. There's just not a lot of good candidates. One candidate that was brought up today, and the reason he's brought up is because of the whole, Tim Kawakami obviously broke the news that they're closing in a deal soon. People were asking him, who do you think is your top candidate? Who's the top candidate? He said he'll release it later in an article. He released it today this morning. And he said that the two candidates, but one in particular that he thinks the 49ers will go after or get as a defensive coordinator. One is the Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley. The second is Jets defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich.
Wait, where did Gus Bradley's name pop up? How did that pop up?
Kawakami just listed him as a potential option for the Niners, Gus Bradley.
That's interesting.
Again, these are both defensive coordinators, so it's not an automatic hire. The team would have to let you go, right? Because you can't just steal another team's defensive coordinator.
Well, you could if you gave them a designation as assistant head coach.
Right. So you'd have to either give them a head coach or like an assistant head coach name, or the team would just have to give them up willingly. Jeff Ulbrich is an interesting name. He's a former 49er, 10 years with the Niners. He's a linebacker, and the Niners love linebackers as their kind of defensive coordinator because it's kind of what brings the continuity together. And it was kind of lacking without, a linebacker coach as a defensive coordinator this year. Ulbrich has experience under the Seahawks and Pete Carroll back in 2010. He also coached with Kyle for a season back with the Falcons. What do you think about Jeff Ulbrich?
Well, let's talk about Gus Bradley first, and then we'll get to Ulbrich. Gus Bradley very well could be the guy. He is the Colts defensive coordinator. He also, he was a guy that, he's worked with Monty Kiffin, who is, obviously Monty Kiffin was the DC on the 2002 Buccaneers, who John Lynch played for, right? And they won the Super Bowl. So that's interesting. And Gus Bradley was the Seahawks defensive coordinator 2009, 10, 11, and 12, and they run this scheme. They run the same scheme that the Niners run. So Gus Bradley's interesting for sure. And he was not only that, he was the defensive coordinator with the Chargers under Anthony Lynn, who was obviously just here with the Niners. So you see some of those same people where I think Gus Bradley, he wasn't very good as a head coach. He was 14-48 as a head coach. But interestingly enough, Gus Bradley's kid, Carter Bradley, is in this draft. He's a quarterback for South Alabama. I kind of like Carter Bradley. And the Niners may get rid of Darnold, and I could see them going after a Carter Bradley. As a day 3 quarterback pick, you move Brandon Allen to number 2 and you draft Carter Bradley number 3. So in a lot of ways, Gus Bradley makes a lot of sense. As far as Ulbrich goes, Ulbrich he is the DC in Detroit in Jets with the Jets now. He was a former Niner, played at Hawaii. And so that would, has relationships, I'm sure, with Jed and others. But, you'd have to make him the assistant head coach. Otherwise, I don't think you can't just take a defensive coordinator from the Jets and say, well, he's now our defensive coordinator. You have to give him a new title that somehow is a promotion. So you'd have to make him the assistant head coach. I don't know if that's a big deal or not. That's probably just a designation and a few more dollars. But Ulbrich is interesting, he was in Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan. Their time there overlapped. Ulbrich was the Falcons, a Falcons coach, and Shanahan was there in 2015 and 2016 as the OC. So, he played for the Niners. When he began his coaching career, it was under Pete Carroll with the Seahawks. So he's got lots of experience in this scheme. And he coached with Kyle in Atlanta. So, and that trust factor is huge. This guy's also spent time with Pete Carroll, with Dan Quinn, who was obviously the DC, or was the head coach in Atlanta, and then with Robert Saleh. So there's a lot, he's definitely, Ulbrich is a great candidate. I think he would be a very, very good candidate.
Yeah.
I think that's, there are people that don't love Jeff Ulbrich. I think that would be a very good call. So Ulbrich, Gus Bradley, and then I'll throw out Monty Kiffin's kid, Chris Kiffin, who's the Houston linebacker under D'Amico, linebacker coach. He had a big hand in the Niners' uncovering of Azeez Al-Shaair as an undrafted free agent. Al-Shaair was on the sideline during the Green Bay playoff game. Al-Shaair's a free agent, and with Greenlaw being where he's at, I could see Al-Shaair being absolutely one of the key free agents the Niners go after. So possibly, Vrabel's coached him, but then also Chris Kiffin has a relationship with him that goes back a number of years. Maybe Chris Kiffin gets the job. So I would say between Ulbrich, Gus Bradley, Chris Kiffin I still would rather go with Belichick, and I would offer him the gig, but those three names are great names.
I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think Ulbrich's a great candidate. Everything makes sense, right? He's working under Saleh, who's under the coaching tree of Shanahan. He understands the defense. He's a former Niner. He has connections to the team. But again, he's a defensive coordinator. And it just shows how few candidates there really is. Like, I like Jim Schwartz as a candidate, but he's the defensive coordinator of the Browns. You can't. And
there's more of a rivalry between Shanahan and him.
No, I know. Ulbrich would be like, he's a former 49er. He's going to embrace it. He's probably from here. I'm just saying, anyone's available then, right? Any defense coordinator is available, because you can't. I don't know how easy or hard it is to just hire another defensive coordinator and just give him a kind of a random title that's like a promotion. If that, I'm not sure if there's rules against that, because I don't know. It seems
you can't take a guy on a lateral situation,
right?
But if you give him the title of assistant head coach, you can get around that.
So then you could hire any defensive coordinator in the entire league if you wanted to.
If you don't have an assistant head coach, somebody
right.
who already mans that position.
So then I guess anyone is technically a potential candidate, technically.
Right, and there's no cap. So you can you can say, hey, Jeff, what do you make with the Jets? Oh, I make $3 million. Okay. I'm making 12. We'll pay you 7.5.
But let's just assume you can't hire another defensive coordinator that already has a job. Say that all these defensive coordinators are well into their plans for next season. They're not jumping.
Well, then
ship
Chris
right
Kiffin's a linebacker coach, so you could potentially, get him.
Right. So then your options are significantly limited.
Vrabel, Belichick, Carroll, Staley, the guys who have, big reps, and have been head coaches, but they're available.
So there's only a few guys, really, in my mind.
Yeah.
Externally.
And are you really gonna run out a guy who is as established and as well known as, if I'm a player, if I'm Nick Bosa, and you run out Steve Wilkes for, Chris Kacherik or
if Chris Kacherik, I would.
I don't know. I don't know if I would. You're still talking about asking somebody to man a role they've never run before, and you're getting rid of a guy who had a top 5, top 10 type defense who just kept down Mahomes. I think it has to be a slam dunk. It has to be like, no question. Gus Bradley, I think, is a real interesting name.
Hiring internally also is just an admission that you made a huge fucking mistake last year, because you interviewed those guys last year and you didn't give them the job, and then you hired a guy from outside. Then as soon as you fire him, you say it wasn't a good fit, and then you hire the guy that you're going to hire last year. It's just like, what were we thinking? What were you thinking? You have a Super Bowl team, and you can't make mistakes like that. That's just not a mistake you can make. Just throwing, something at the wall, hoping it sticks with Steve Wilkes, and then admitting that you were completely wrong and hiring someone from internally the next season. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. You were just saying that you wouldn't like if Kocurek, it would be a step down with Kocurek. I think Kocurek might be the only coach in this team that if he did get promoted, I'd be like, you know what? He's been there long. He's an established coach. He's a good coach. Like, I could see that as an internal.